Shalom, all praises to Yahweh by Shem Yahushai, and double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone by Shem Kwadash. My name is Yakaba from Plain Tables Camp in Philly. This is Hebrew and Aramaic are different languages, but they're closely related. Look up Aramaic language. It says it was closely related to Hebrew. All right. And became the lingua franca, or the common language of what the Babylonians and the Assyrians. Now, the Syrians spoke Aramaic. That was the first. That's literally what their name comes from. Aramaic. Aram. Aramaic goes back to Aram. All right. So, as relating to the Greek and the Hebrew, describing the languages, they're two different words. So that's the point of this lesson. Hebrew language is written a certain way in Greek, and the Aramaic language is written a certain way in the Greek. So we're gonna look up some information first, because Aramaic supplanted Hebrew, because the Babylonians spoke Aramaic, and the Babylonian Syrian, or the Babylonian Assyrian Empire spoke Aramaic. Right? And the Syrians, or Aram, spoke Aramaic also. During the 6th century, Babylonian captivity brought the working language to Mesopotamia. All right, much more into the daily life of ordinary Israelites. Around 500 BC, Darius I of Persia proclaimed that Aramaic would be the official language of the western half of the empire. All right, so you look here and you can read how Aramaic supplanted the Hebrew over time. All right, Hebrew is used as first language in society. Other similar Canaanite languages are known and understood. Aramaic is used in international diplomacy and foreign trade. Aramaic is used for communication between subjects and the imperial administration. Aramaic gradually became the language of the outer life in the marketplace, for example. And because we were, minorities amongst people that spoke Aramaic, so we learned to speak Aramaic. Aramaic gradually replaces Hebrew in the home, and the latter is used only in religious activities. So you had the two languages. All right. However, we were using the Aramaic characters to speak Hebrew. All right, and I meant to write Hebrew. All right, but there are two different languages, is my point. Now let's look at the text. Now, how do you say Aramaic language? How do you say Hebrew language in Greek? They're two different words. All right, so the Bible was written in Hebrew. All right, from Genesis to Daniel, and then when you get to the book of Daniel and coming out of Babylon, you'll see a mixture of both Hebrew and Aramaic. All right. So if you look up Hebrew tongue, you'll see it. Hebrew tongue, Hebrew tongue, Hebrew tongue. All right. This is not Aramaic. All right. If it was in an Aramaic tongue, a different word would be there. All right. It says Hebrew tongue in John 5:2, Acts 21, Acts 22, Acts 26, Revelation 9:11, and Revelation 16:16. Let's go Revelation 16:16. It says, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue it has the name of Apollyon. So look up Abaddon. So this is a transliteration from Hebrew to Greek. All right, we got Abadwan, like destruction. And it goes back to the Hebrew origin. Now, let's look up Hebrew tongue, 1447. I should have that up. 1447. You have, in the Greek, you have Hebraisti. Hebraisti, which means Hebrew, which is different from Aramaic. Okay? They say Chaldee. No, Chaldee was referring to Aramaic. It's Hebraistically, meaning Hebrew. Or in the, it says Jewish Chaldee language, in the Hebrew tongue. All right? Which when you say Jewish Chaldee, you're saying basically it's a mixture of Hebrew and Aramaic. All right? But this is how you say Hebrew. All right? In the Hebrew tongue, Hebraisti. Okay? Now let's look in the Syrian tongue. Go to the book of Daniels. In the Greek, I already got it highlighted. Well, we got Suristi. All right, and conveniently no strong associated number. But this is how you say the Aramaic language. Suristi. And this is from Daniel 2:4. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Saranic. We look up Saranic. It means it's Aramaic. I'm going to say right here, Saranic. We got Aramyath. You should know that by now. Aramyath. Which is 762. 762. Aramyath. Aramaic. So then spoke the king in Aramaic. He said king, right? Yep, king. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Aramaic. And how do you say Aramaic in Greek? Suristi. All right. So these were the Babylonians that came up against Judah, which were the Assyrian Babylonian kingdom came up against Judah. All right. But they represented themselves as Babylonians. Then spake Eliakim the son of Hilkiah and Shebna and Joah unto Rabshakeh, speak, I pray thee, to thy servants in the Aramaic language. All right. It's translated Assyrian tongue, but you can put Aramaic there. That's the more proper name. In the Aramaic language, for we understand it. All right. We got Aramaic. We got Aramyath. All right. Which is H762. And when you go down, you'll see what? Suristi. All right. So that's how you say Aramaic language in Greek. You would say Suristi. All right. And how do you say Hebrew language in Greek? You would say Hebraisti. Hebraisti. All right. So there are two different words describing two different languages, although you could say a large majority of us people spoke not the pure Hebrew. All right, but that's pertaining to the text. When these things are mentioned, it's referring to the Hebrew and not the Aramaic. All right. This title then read many of the Jews, for the place where Yahushua was crucified was nigh to the city. It was written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, because our people could read and understand Hebrew and Aramaic. All right, but Hebrew was the language that we use within, according to what I read, during religious ceremonies and the communication between each other. But when you went out into the marketplace, Aramaic was spoken also. All right. Only people that were really speaking Hebrew, the pure Hebrew, was the educated Israelites or Israel in general. All right. And it defines it. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. All right. So there's a distinction between the Hebrew tongue and the Aramaic tongue. Two different words used. So you got Hebrew tongue, Hebraisti, all right, and the Chaldean tongue, which is different. See, they going off here. And the Chaldean tongue, all right, spake the Chaldees in Saranic. All right. You have, let's scroll over a little bit. Right there, okay. Suristi. All right, that lines up with Saranic, Aramyath, which means Aramaic, H762. All right, so Aramaic lines up with Aramyath and Suristi, Aramaic language. All right, Hebrew, Hebristi, Hebrew language. Now they keep trying to throw Chaldean there. Let's look that up. There you go farther in the word Hebrais, which means Hebrew language. Now, what they're saying is that the language that was spoken was not pure Hebrew. All right, you could say that for many Israelites, yeah, it wasn't pure Hebrew. All right, but it wasn't Aramaic. All right, because they have adopted, our ancestors adopted certain Aramaic words. That's likely, and they definitely were using Aramaic characters. So Hebrew, this is what they say, Hebrew language, but not the pure Hebrew. It says not that, however, in which the Old Testament was written, but the Chaldee, which at the time of Yahushua and the apostles had long superseded it in Palestine. But the Chaldee is Aramaic. So this is why people say the Bible is written in Aramaic. All right. So I proved to you that Aramaic and Hebrew are different. All right. Now you can argue that most of Israel wasn't speaking the pure Hebrew, but when it comes to the educated class, you can put an argument for that. For the Lord himself, they were speaking, we believe they were speaking the pure Hebrew. And they understood the Aramaic, and they understood the adopted words that came into Hebrew. All right. Here's the scriptures where it shows up at. When the Lord himself speaking Hebrew, he wasn't. It's not likely that the Lord was just speaking a corrupt Hebrew. He was speaking pure Hebrew, and Paul understood it. And when we were all fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me, saying in the Hebrew tongue. So according to Blue Letter, they're saying, well, it's not. They're saying it's not the pure Hebrew that was being spoken. All right. But we believe it is a pure Hebrew that was being spoken, especially by the Lord. Now you can put forth an argument with the common people that were totally assimilated by the Babylonians and then by the Greeks. It was a corrupt form of Hebrew. All right. But here's the example of the Lord. And saying in the Hebrew tongue, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? Is it hard for thee to kick against the pricks? All right. So even here it admits that the Old Testament was written in the pure Hebrew, all right, or the ancient prophets before Yahushua came. All right. And then by the time of Babylon, the Hebrew had adopted the Aramaic characters and certain Aramaic words. All right. So the point is the Aramaic language and the Hebrew language are different. All right. All right. We got Aramaic language. You got Suresti in the Greek. Suresti, Aramaic language. Hebrew language, Hebrasti. All right. Hebrew language. All right. It's still Hebrew, even if you're using slang. You may have adopted certain Aramaic words into your language. You may be using different characters. All right. But it's still Hebrew. All right. And there is a distinction between the Aramaic language and the Hebrew language. All right. Just like we speak English today, it's like we don't even speak like the real English. All right. But it's still considered English. All right. Although it's not pure English. All right, it has other like German, Latin, which I believe English comes from German anyway, if I'm not mistaken, or Latin, one of those languages. They're related. All right, but they're two distinct languages. And we know the Lord, what language was he speaking? He was speaking the pure Hebrew tongue, and Paul understood. All right. So this distinguishes the Hebrew language as opposed to Aramaic. All right. And Suresti describes the Aramaic language as opposed to the Hebrew language. All right. And I think I have one more point to prove that it's a different language. Even though you can say we've adapted certain words from Aramaic and certain words from Greek, all right, it's still Hebrew for the most part. All right. And we know the Lord spoke in Hebrew. In the Jews' language. It says, for we understand it. Let's read that first. I pray thee to thy servants, and speak, I pray thee to thy servants in Aramaic, for we understand it, and talk not with us in the Jews' language, in the ears of the people that are by the wall. Right? So they didn't want them to be, cursing Israel, where Israel could directly understand it, because it put them in fear. Because they were the leaders of Israel at the time, and he was saying, "Well, just speak to us in Aramaic, so it'll be harder for them to interpret, so it won't put the people in fear. They might want to flee, panic." All right, so he was trying to control the information, make it harder for Israel to understand. So he said, "Nah, we're gonna speak because they could speak each other's languages." All right, the elite of the the Babylonians and the Israelites. So we got a Jews language, Yahweh Diyath. Hebrew, all right, Yahweh Diyath. All right, the language of the kingdom of Judah. All right, which was Hebrew. All right, so there it's different. All right. So just because the 100% of the nation of Israel, Judah, Benjamin, Levi, over there in the land of Israel, because 100% of them wasn't speaking the pure Hebrew language, doesn't mean they weren't speaking Hebrew. All right. They were speaking Hebrew with adoptions from Aramaic. All right. They're still speaking Hebrew. All right. And the Lord, Yahweh Shai, definitely, when he came to speak to Paul, was speaking Hebrew. Paul, why persecutest thou me? And it explicitly says, in the Hebrew tongue, Abadan, Abadawan. All right, and it goes back to the Hebrew. All right, when it was pure. All right, so that's the lesson. So when they say, was the Bible written in Hebrew, was the Bible written in Aramaic, cite to them the history of how Aramaic supplanted Hebrew. All right, and that's the reason why people say that the Bible is written in Aramaic. All right, it was the Aramaic supplanted Hebrew during the time of the Babylonian Empire, the Assyro-Babylonian Empire. Right? But Hebrew was still spoken by Israel. It was just that it had adaptations from Aramaic. All right, and the Bible's a big book. All right, before Babylonians, every Israelite was speaking in pure Hebrew. All right, and as we were scattered, it got corrupt. All right, and then the letters to the Israelite foreigners, all right, the Hellenists, written in Greek, because that's the language that they adopted. That's the customs that they adopted. All right, and the Israelites, the circumcision, it was written in the Hebrew. With their various, customs of the Aramaic, what I'm sure were included. The different slangs and adapted words in Aramaic, but it was still Hebrew. All right. So the Bible was written in Hebrew and Greek with certain Aramaic adaptations. All right. So that's the answer. All right. Yeah. So I hope you were edified. Shalom to the next lesson.